welcome to our second Ladies Who Launch meetup. Just as a bit of background behind Women in Tech, myself and a couple of colleagues at Third Republic founded the group as a platform for women working in the world of tech to share, help, and encourage their peers. Since its inception last October, we've grown to a community of over 1,500 members in our US meetup group. Our focus is to make technology a more attractive and inclusive working environment for all. This evening, we are joined by Kathryn Van Nuys and Brittany Hart, and they will tell you both a little bit about themselves. I would like to welcome Kathryn to take the floor.
Thank you, Kara. So I thought I'd talk a little bit just about kind of my career and how I transitioned from financial services and enterprises into startups and then ultimately into technology, and a couple of lessons learned along the way. A little bit about me. I started my career at Citigroup in debt capital markets. I am based in New York City, and I worked in mortgage securitization, and that was when the height of that product pre-financial crisis. And then I moved over to Lehman Brothers, where I was on the short-term credit trading desk and worked on asset-backed commercial paper. And so after Lehman, I found myself looking for a new job. I think this is where I learned kind of a lesson that has served me well, and ultimately is like a key reason why I ended up my career took the turns it has. Was really about being open to opportunities and not writing something off, because I was contacted about a job and wasn't even going to go in for the interview. It was with a company called Rvps Global Economics. It's a macroeconomic research company. I didn't know much about it. I came from these big organizations and didn't really know much about startups or really just working with a much smaller team. And so, but at the urging of my father to at least go see, he said, what did I have to lose? And he certainly was right. I ended up really liking the people that I met and took that job. And so it ended up being my first taste of startups, working at this company, Rvps Global Economics, and really changed the course of my career. It was also super fortuitous because one of the people I met on that interview was my now husband's roommate. And so at the time, so it took about maybe a little more than 3 years for that connection to actually happen, but certainly changed not only my career, but my personal life. And so that company, as many of you are in technology or startups or entrepreneurs in your own right, that company was growing super fast, and I really loved the opportunity to wear a lot of hats and take on new responsibilities. I ended up moving to London with this company and ran the sales side for the business for EMEA and Asia Pacific. And so was there for a few years, came back to the US, and then ultimately found my way into FinTech, where I led business development and capital markets for consumer lender and then SMB, small business lender. And so it was really kind of taking my experience in financial services and capital markets and sort of parlaying that into how that would be relevant at a startup. And so it was at the last company that I was at when a friend of mine contacted me about a role at AWS. And so I initially wasn't interested as well in this role for a couple of reasons. At the time, I was 6 months pregnant with my first child, and I was pretty happy. So I wasn't exactly looking for a big change and taking on a lot more, going back into an unknown environment, what would the hours be like? What would the demands of my time be? And then I also knew nothing about AWS. So I was familiar with Amazon, AWS, I'm sure you all know, but just in case, Amazon Web Services. I didn't see how my skill set would fit in at a cloud technology company. I knew very little about cloud when I first found out about this job. And a friend of mine urged me to meet the team. And so I trusted her and decided to go for the meeting. So again, always good to take a meeting and learn. I realize you can't take every meeting and you have to pick and choose, but being open-minded and kind of broadening at a minimum, you're making a good connection and broadening your network. So we know how the story ends up as you see the logo on my screen. I should have mentioned because of COVID, I've been staying out, me and my family, at my parents' place outside of Manhattan. So because we're all working from home and didn't have enough space in New York City, so that's a very messy background. So I have this up, but I knew very little about what I was gonna kind of experience there, but loved the team and ended up joining. And so I can talk about my role, but I think as this is a group of entrepreneurs and people interested in startups and technology, I thought it'd be kind of worthwhile because I knew nothing about this 2 years ago. Just quickly touching on like what AWS does and what the cloud is. And I know this might be basic for some of you. I hope for others it's newer. So I'll just spend a couple minutes on this. But cloud computing is really about the on-demand delivery of IT resources via the internet, pay-as-you-go pricing. So rather than and actually one of the startups I worked at did this, buying, owning, and maintaining your own data centers and servers, you acquire technology such as computing and storage or databases, machine learning services, and so many other services on an as-needed basis. And so AWS maintains all of the technology infrastructure in a secure environment. And then, in my world, it's startups, but certainly any business can access these resources via the internet to develop and run their businesses and their applications. And then capacity can shrink or grow depending on what they need, and businesses only pay for what they use. And so kind of what got me excited about this job and what I do now is I clearly saw the value proposition that offers startups. And I'm sure you're aware, startups are all, if not overwhelmingly, cloud native today. I can't really think of one that isn't. So kind of having low cost, easy to use infrastructure to build and grow their business is a very strong value proposition. And when you think about my focus, which is financial services, I think about it's global, it's secure, it's reliant infrastructure for companies to build. And so when you look at like cloud and why it's important, it's agility. So companies can spin up resources as they need, and it allows for a lot of experimentation and innovation. I talked a little bit about the cost savings, that they don't have this large capital expenditure and instead have the variable cost of cloud. That's really been just a game changer in allowing startups to get up and running. So rather than having to raise millions of dollars just to kind of get your servers set up, you can actually focus on what differentiates your business, and you need a lot less upfront capital. There's elasticity, which is the ability to scale up or down. So that's exactly what Amazon.com does for Black Friday or Prime Day when they need a lot more capacity versus maybe a normal day when they don't. The breadth of functionality and the ability to go global in minutes. And so what's exciting to me is that when you look at all the innovation that's happening in financial services, the cloud is powering all of the fintechs and startups that are disruptors, but also partners to the financial services space. And I think we all know now how important it is to be agile and innovative in a world that customer experiences are changing fast, and if you want to remain competitive in the long term. And so you think about a company like Robinhood, they're able to leverage the low cost of a company like AWS to offer commission-free trading. They now have over 4 million customers, and really drove change across the wealth, financial services, wealth management industry, as JP Morgan and Vanguard and Fidelity had to move to compete with these zero fees. And this kind of goes across the board. You think about Coinbase and cryptocurrency, or like a firm in lending, or the buy now pay later space, or TransferWise and payments and Betterment. So they're just driving a lot of this change, and now we as consumers and customers are used to better, more personalized customer service. And so that's a little bit about cloud. But my organization, I'm within the startup organization, and we work with companies from the very, very early stages all the way through the different phases of their growth. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're a small business owner, you may have heard about the Aws Lofts. So we have one in New York and San Francisco and a couple others around the globe. And that's a place that it's really, as long as you have an AWS account, which is free, it takes a second to sign up, you can go there. It's a co-working space. There's technical resources there. And we do a ton of programming as well. I think this was actually, one of these events was supposed to be hosted at our AWS Loft, I believe. So we don't just support startups with cloud infrastructure, but we really want to be a partner and think about what are the resources we can provide to tackle challenges you may face. So whether that's early stage fundraising, building technical teams, or developing startup culture. And so in my role, I really focus on helping fintech companies achieve success through AWS. And so I guess kind of concluding, in order to be effective in my role, I had to take a business and a financial services background, which is very relevant, but my gap was clearly technology. And I was able to sort of spin that into that's the piece I needed to learn, but here's all the other reasons and what I can bring to the job. And so I've had to learn a lot more than I ever expected, and I've only scratched the surface. I'm still very much a novice. And so if any of you are curious, I think, one of the things that I do see in talking to investors and startups is sort of understanding the technology piece, knowing how things work. That definitely can kind of make you a lot more dangerous on the business side. And so you can create free accounts at AWS, or I'm sure some of the other platforms as well. There's a plethora of training and resources. There's other sites such as the Cloud Guru, which is one that I've used to train and kind of do more hands-on type exercises. And even if you're interested in artificial intelligence or machine learning, which is clearly a hot area, I have a colleague, Ali Miller, who's an absolute force in the space. You can follow her as well on LinkedIn and for all sorts of recommendations on sort of how to get started and kind of wetting your feet there. So I'm happy to kind of answer any questions about that, career, starting a new job when I was kind of about to have my first child, or AWS, or anything to do with cloud. And if you don't have any questions, please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you, Kathryn. And at this point, I'd like to welcome Brittany to take the floor.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to be here with all of you today. I'm going to be talking with you about steps to starting a technology consulting company. Kind of throughout my presentation and conversation together, you'll get my background and what led me here to talk to you today. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of dive into it. So I'm going to start off with a little story. My story started when I was 5 years old. I had a dream of running my own business. Now, did I realize that was my dream at that young age? Probably not. But my business at that point was selling river rocks to my neighbors. I hope you're all chuckling at this point. I would sell them for 50 cents a rock. It was a great business. I had no overhead to think of. I would gather the best looking rocks from my front yard and go down the street knocking on doors, asking neighbors to buy them. And I was successful. However, one day, a neighbor, let's call him Joe. Everyone knows at least one Joe in their life, right? He wouldn't buy the rock I was trying to sell him. Being a tenacious little girl, I said, well, Joe, why won't you buy my rock? He said, it's not unique. It's the same as all the rocks I have in my front yard. So I trudged back down the street with my head slumped over. I hated that feeling of Joe not wanting to buy what I was selling. Should I close up shop? Should I move on to my next dream of being a professional dancer? No, that's crazy. I had sold at least 10 rocks by this point, and I just needed to add that little something that would make this different than all the other rocks on the street. So I had an epiphany that afternoon. I would transform my rocks into art. Yes, that was it. This was going to work. So I took out my paint set and I started making different designs on the rocks. The next weekend, I set back out to sell my, not rocks, but my art. I marched back up to Joe's door and I pushed the bell. He answered and I said, good morning, Joe. I think you should buy one of my rocks today. And he said, I told you they're the same as all the other rocks in the street. And I said, yes, but now it is art. And I showed him my basket of rocks. He said, fair enough, I will buy a rock from you today. And I said, great, now it's $1. And he said, last week it was 50 cents. Why is it $1 now? And I said, well, now it's a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. You told me it had to be unique. So I just want you all to know that if I had stuck with that career of selling rocks, I would be a millionaire by now. In any of your local craft stores, you can go and buy a rock art set today, and you can go ahead and start selling off your rock art as well. Well, soon my interest changed from selling rocks to jewelry, and I started selling jewelry on the playground. Now, for all of those who have kids, I know we're not on playgrounds yet. It's not a good idea. The principal did not think very highly of my profitable shares on the playground. So that kind of squashed my creativity for a while, and I went on to selling candy for 25 cents less than the vending machines on our high school campus. You could make a killing at lunchtime because any high schooler will spend 25 cents less to get the candy that they want. And a little fun fact, Fun Dip has the highest margin when you're selling on the high school campuses. This entrepreneur spirit that I had led me on many church mission trips and drove me towards my first job when I was 16. So as I continued to think about the steps of creating a consulting business, because not all of us start dreaming of selling things at the age of 5, I thought about the long list of things that you practically have to do to open a business. First, you have to select a company name. Now it's important, but don't spend too much time here. A little secret, we took about 1 day to choose our company name. And the most important thing to me on our name was that it could earn a nickname, P3. That helps it stick in people's head. Instead of Platinum Cubed, Salesforce knows us as P3, and many of our customers do as well. The second piece, decide on your incorporation type. Now, for this one, make sure you talk to an accountant. For the third one, file all of your government documents. And trust me, there are more of those than you think there should be. 4, create a website. Again, don't get hung up here, get a clean homepage and get rolling. 5, purchase business insurance. And make sure you don't skip this one because it's really important down the road. And then sell your first deal. You're up and running, consulting technology business. Looking at my outline and going through each of these steps started putting me to sleep. Seems so boring, and really this meeting is full of very intelligent women and men that are very capable of Googling how to start a consulting business. So with that, I took the piece of paper and I threw it in the trash. And yes, when I start writing something new, I do start with pen and paper because there's something powerful about taking a bad idea and throwing it away. And where I ended up were with 3 topics that we're going to discuss today. 1, give it a full body yes. I'm sure you're wondering what that means, and we'll dive into it. Number 2, transform strangers into advocates. And number 3, join forces, don't compete. Give it a full body yes. Up until last year, I have been playing a single facet role. I was an amazing saleswoman. I mean, for goodness sakes, I could sell rocks to people and they were happy to buy them. But that soon changed into transforming and selling Salesforce consulting services to companies. I sold companies the dream of a consultant team that knew their business, knew their problems, and knew exactly how to solve those problems for the right price. But that was very singular focused, and I was growing someone else's business. So I not only wanted to play a more complex role and multidimensional role, I wanted to be the director and start shaping the role that each day I got to play. So I transitioned from this cardboard cutout that stood in the background of someone else's production and started making my own production. Transitioning from that cardboard cutout to CEO of a thriving consulting company required me to give this dream a full body yes. That means getting all of the doubts out of your head and removing any of the boulders that you might stumble over to achieving your goal. Getting the doubts out of my head. I'm not sure if this is a problem isolated to women or if it's wider spread, but I had this little inner nagging voice telling me that I would never be successful, that all my previous success was due to outside variables and not to variables within my own control. After much reflection and great deal of conversations with mentors, I silenced that voice and moved on to what might have been an even bigger boulder. And actually, it was Mount Everest for me. Ever since my first son was born in 2017, I felt like a bad mom for working. More so, I was a road warrior in sales. I never got to see him. And in 2018, I don't know if any of you saw this circulate, but this article about mom shaming for working moms came out. And ever since then, I carried that with me wherever I went and every day I went to work. How would I be able to be a good mom while pursuing my dream? I knew I had to find the dynamite that would explode this mountain that stood between me and my dream. So my husband and I decided to relocate from the East Coast to Arizona, where I would have the best support system available to us to launch this business. I'm fortunate enough to have amazing parents to watch both of my boys so I can go to work. Even further, my mom will travel with my son. This one is now 3.5, but this is his very first airplane flight when he was 4 months old. And my second son, who is 4 months old now, and this is a hotel room that I'm sitting in because he took his very first business trip this week with us. They help ensure that I can be present with my children and continue running the business. So I wanted to share this quote, that there's no one perfect way to be a good mother. Each situation is unique. Each mother has different challenges, different skills and abilities, and certainly different children. The choice to be different and unique for each mother and family. I am beyond blessed to have the support system I have, and I encourage each of you, as you look towards your full body yes, to find a deep-rooted support system to serve as your loudest cheerleader, a system that will carry you towards your success no matter where you are in your life. Let's move on to that second point, transforming strangers into advocates. Other titles I had for this point was spinning your own web, or who you know really does matter. The strategy of transforming strangers into advocates is applicable wherever you are in your career, whether you're starting a company or maintaining the position that you're in. The connection and relationship you have with people really does matter. Let me say that again. The connection and relationship you have with people really does matter. The first area of strangers we're going to talk about is Salesforce Partner Alliances. Platinum Cubed is a Salesforce consulting partner. You could be looking at other technologies to be implementing, such as AWS for different companies, and you'd work with their partner alliance team, just like we work with Salesforce. So when you become a Salesforce solution integrator, that's what they call us, by the way, a Salesforce solutions integrator, you have to go through an application and a vetting process. This process can take months to get through. And until you're a registered partner, Salesforce will not bring you any deals to work on. I worked over the past 7 years fostering a deep relationship with someone in the Salesforce Partner Alliance community. This relationship helped expedite our application, and we were approved partner within 2 weeks of submitting our application. The very next day, our first deal was brought to us by Salesforce, all because that one individual who once was a stranger had become one of our biggest advocates at Salesforce. So I encourage you, if you're starting Salesforce consulting business, start getting to know the Alliances team. They're great to work with. The second set of strangers I want to talk about are Salesforce account executives and RVPs. Our strategy was to win over a few AEs to feed us deals. Trust me, it's easier to sell consulting services to someone who's already bought on to the technology that they're interested in. So to share the structure of Salesforce, we start with the area vice president. They typically are over the growth business and the small business sectors. The strategy we took was to target 2 RVPs, one in growth business and one in small business. From there, we wanted to interact with all of their account executives. So I know this chart's a bit deceiving, but there's about 20 account executives between those 2 teams. And I interact with them on a weekly basis because we're salespeople. You have to stay in front of us to stay top of mind. So if you look at that and think that on average, they're closing at least 1 deal every other month, that's 120 deals in a year. That's plenty of deals for you to get started as a consulting business for your first year, your second year, and possibly even into your 3rd year. So how do we keep their attention? The first way we keep their attention is to price ourselves competitively. This doesn't mean lose money, but make sure that you're competitive in your pricing. The second piece is to be honest and transparent. Help the AEs understand what the clients need today and start planting the seeds for the future. We worked with one account executive and they only sold 2 licenses. They were so discouraged. But in a short 2 months, we then sold another 10 licenses and 2 other products into that same client. And we were able to help and expand. And that AE started to see the fruits of planting the seeds that early on. And number 3, stay in front of the account executives. We planned a donut you want to know session with the AEs right after COVID hit. We were all scheduled to go on site and had to cancel the travel and almost canceled the session, but decided to do that remotely. It was success. But as COVID continued to elongate, we decided we needed to up our game. And the next time, since we typically provide lunch for everyone in attendance, we decided to send them Uber Eats gift cards so that they could get themselves whatever lunch they wanted to and come to the meeting. That took out any excuse that they had to miss the meeting with us so that we could talk to them and educate them on our services. Now, The third set of strangers, your customers. And I'm going to leave this awkward email up. We'll get to exactly what it means in a minute, but it was an awkward email to send. We'll leave it at that. So I worked as a Salesforce consultant for 7 years before starting Platinum Cubed. And prior to that, I had worked at a consulting company and some internal companies and had started to build that network that we just talked about of advocates. And the hard truth is, when you start a business, your very first deal could want a reference. And what are you going to say? Well, Bob, you're actually my very first customer that I'm hoping to get. So I don't have any references for you, but I'm hoping you're going to be one for me in the future. No, you can't say that to them. So you get creative. And I chose to leverage any client that I personally had worked with in the past to serve as a reference to their experience with me. Not my previous company, but what was your experience with me? And this email that you see up here is one of those emails. I had to blatantly say that I worked with them a few years ago and put them in contact and hope for the best. Well, this one worked out. We kicked off this project today, and that's why I'm traveling. So that was a great success story out of this. So creating that web of advocates will help grow your business faster than you ever thought possible. Before I jump on, we now have a great NASCAR slide full of great clients and great testimonials that we can send out to those. So it does really happen and come to fruition. So the third point is about joining forces and not competing. By definition, business competitors are supposed to, I know if we were in the room, you'd answer me back, but we're supposed to compete. That's the way things have always been done. We carve out our share in the market and we fight to grow it, and we look at different approaches to figure out how quickly we can move faster and faster. However, when we started the business, we quickly discovered that companies in the same market don't always have to try to beat each other to be successful. In fact, if we're downright kind with our competition, it works out better for all parties involved. When you launch a technology consulting business, you most likely have a surplus of resources and a lack of sales, right? In technology consulting, we talk about sitting on the bench or having resources on the bench. If you don't have this problem, let's talk afterwards, because we need to look at your resourcing. But Platinum Cube was just that. We had a surplus of people, 2 people, that could deliver Salesforce consulting services, but we had no customers to deliver them to. So I made the decision that while I love the thought of climbing our way to the top and being that #1 Salesforce consulting company in the world, we'd get there someday, that getting there at the expense of relationships or tearing down some really great companies was not the way that we were going to do it. So I made the strategic decision that I was going to subcontract out to companies that had sales but lacked resources to deliver. For the first time, I saw a path to not only growing one great consulting company, but helping others on their journey to building awesome companies as well. Platinum Cube secured a 9-month subcontracting agreement with IBM. While our team worked diligently on that contract, we were able to secure our first deal. From there, a second and a third, and so on and so on. We also sent deals out to our competitors when customers needed services that we were not able to deliver. And guess what? They started sending deals to us that were not a good fit for them. And now, due to our great service, we continue to get those referrals to other consulting companies and contract out to them. First and foremost, we consider our customers. If our customers will benefit more from getting part of their services or all of their services from a competitor, then we join forces to give them the best. That's what they deserve. All of our consulting companies are solving the same problems, managing resources, selling. We're all doing this in parallel. And sometimes by combining forces, we become stronger than trying to do it alone. In summation, starting a technology consulting business was not something I decided to do overnight, and probably not something you're going to decide to do overnight. My dream and plan for this company started 6 years ago. That was before I added 2 wonderful boys to my family. Before I knew how to calculate margin on resources, which is really important for running a profitable business. And before I found the right business partner to make my dream a reality, 6 years in the making. Then, when the time was right, aligning everything to make it a reality, making sure that you give it a full body yes, that you transform strangers into advocates, and joining forces with competition. I look back to that little girl who was peddling rocks, and I'm grateful that she didn't stop selling at the first sign of resistance, but learned that each person is looking for something unique. Thanks so much for your time today.
Brittany, thank you so much for that. And also, Kathryn, thank you as well for presenting. There was a question actually for the both of you guys. So looking back, would you have done anything differently throughout your journey of building a business?
As I think back, I think that personally, I wish I had kept a notebook of those pivotal learning moments that I had throughout the years. Because starting the business, I think back and I'm like, I encountered this before. How did I deal with that? And I wish I had been better at keeping those notes for starting my own business.
Yeah, I think in general, I think that's something actually I do now, because I find when you look back on your career, sometimes it's hard to remember some of the lessons that you're learning. I think the biggest thing for me is being more mindful about kind of working with mentors and being now a mentor. I felt like I probably let a few relationships early in my career. It was a big focus of mine. I let certain things I think I let some of those relationships lapse as I got kind of into my career, feeling that maybe I didn't need the same type of support. And I think what I've learned is building, always having mentors throughout your career and someone to kind of talk to and learn from is incredibly important, and something I've sort of refocused on now, kind of after letting that not be something I thought too much about for a while.
Thank you. And then another question, I think this one's for Brittany. So out of the 3 steps you discussed, which was the hardest?
Well, that's a good question. So I think taking strangers into advocates is definitely the most time intensive, right? Working with anyone on relationship building is very time intensive. I think the hardest is probably swallowing your pride and working with your competitors, right? It's not first nature for me to reach out and say, hey, I don't have sales, but I have all these people who can deliver things. Or vice versa. Now we're kind of in the opposite, as we have lots of sales and now we need to resource those to deliver. So I think being open and transparent with others about the struggles that you're having is probably the hardest piece of scaling the business.
How do you decide whether you go with the delivery side first or the sales side first?
That's a great question. So we started the business with Sharon and myself. We're both certified admins, and I carried the sales side of the business. So we kind of started with a balance of both. But true to the story, we could both be delivering services, and until you get that first deal, which may be a week or 2 weeks, 2 weeks is pretty quick to close a deal from start to finish. You're kind of a sitting duck, right? So I would say typically you want to have a resource so that as soon as you sign something, you're ready to go with it.
And then Kathryn, this is for you. What would you say has been the biggest hurdle during the early stages of your career in cloud?
Yeah, I think this is, so I guess there's two pieces. One is, I think when you are in a situation where I didn't know the technology very well, is not pretending and not being on customer calls and acting as if I knew something I didn't, and sort of over indexing on the areas that I did know. So that was, important. So just coming up to speed on that part of the business. But what's been sort of my biggest challenge, at AWS in general, is the scale of the company is so massive. Like the number of customers that we work with there's millions of customers on AWS, and in FinTech, there's many thousands. And so kind of being ruthlessly prioritizing time to focus on the highest impact things has been something I've really tried to do, and to say no to more things and just really focus in on the things that are going to have the most impact for the most customers. That's something I struggle with all the time. And what I've done now is every week it's what are the key 3 things I need to accomplish this week, and then every day kind of having my focus area. Otherwise it's very easy to get spread very thin and really not get anything get like a lot of little things done, but not really make the big things happen.
How do you ensure you have consistent and predictable revenue?
So that's a great question. And it's something that we talk about on a weekly basis. When you're in consulting, right, you're always looking at that next project and you're projecting your cash flow on what you see in the pipeline. One thing that we did strategically is we offer what we call Pathfinder. In the industry, it's called managed services, where customers will sign up and say, we don't have the need for a full-time Salesforce administrator in-house. Can we offload that role to your team and we'll serve as that outsourced virtual admin for them and in a partial role. And then from there, you can sign 12 months or 24-month contracts that you then have that reoccurring revenue that you can plan and forecast your business on. But it is a challenge because we are very project-based. And so it's making sure that you do have that healthy pipeline because you're not going to win every deal. So you start looking and saying, what is our close rate and how do we start predicting that into the future?
Thank you. And then another question, Brittany, can you talk a bit more about the process for becoming a Salesforce partner?
Sure. So Salesforce, I think it's partners.salesforce.com is the website that you go to, and that's where you can start the application. You do have to have a website, your business name, and you have to have your SEC filing with the state as a bare minimum to start the process. And then they are going to interview you on like your business plan, what makes you different than all the other partners out there, or if you're not different, how are you going to compete with them, and goes through an interview process. Then it goes into, I believe it's a legal review from there, make sure all your documents are in order, and then you kind of get set up with a partner alliances manager. And that's not the partner alliances that I was talking about in the presentation though, because when you start at this level, you're about 1 to 200 Salesforce partners that this person is managing. So you don't get a lot of one-on-one attention when you get started, but there's a lot of help in the partner community. And if you're interested in doing this, this is one of the areas that Sharon and I are really passionate in. That's why I wanted to present on, join forces, don't compete. We'd love to help you get started on your path and your success.
Thank you. And then a question for both of you guys. What are your top tips for others looking to start a business?
Sure. So from my perspective, when we think about like starting a business, it's very much, I think about, from the startup perspective. And I think, it needs to be something that you're, fairly obvious, but passionate about and care about, because this is going to be your life, and, you're putting sort of everything into it. And I think when you think about, from the startup business and raising capital, it's like they need to why are you uniquely positioned, and why is your experience unique to be founding this company or to be starting this business? And so, I think like Brittany talked about why her experience and what set her apart, and kind of put her down this path was her experience sort of, in Salesforce and knowing it so well. And so I think just making sure it's something you're super passionate about, and are willing to really go all out for. And then I think I mentioned having the right network of mentors and advisors is critical. I think whether it's a small business or a fast growing startup, building out your board of advisors, even if it's just like an informal board that people you can go to if you don't know technology, someone for that. If you don't know financial services, someone you can talk to. Not everyone knows everything, so you need to kind of build out your network of specialists.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And from a startup standpoint, I think removing those boulders, right? So some of the boulders that I didn't talk about is being financially set up to do it, right? So as Kathryn mentioned, you can go out and you can raise capital, or you can take the strategy of funding yourself. When you're doing a product, you by far need capital because you're going to be manufacturing. When you're doing consulting, right, it's paying yourself or paying your employees the services that you're providing. So you can scale it more if you're willing to go hungry a little bit right up front. You can start the business without having to go out and get a business loan. And so I think one of the tips that I didn't talk about is making sure you set yourself up financially for what that first year of business is going to look like.
Thank you. This question coincides with what I just asked, but what would be the best piece of advice you've ever received during your career?
Never give up. I know it's cliche, but I mean, if that's your dream, then make it a reality.
Yeah, and I think mine's something I'm learning more now. It's about learning to say no. Even though I talked a little bit about taking opportunities and kind of building your network, and that's important, but also knowing when you need time, like not to let yourself burn out, especially, Brittany and myself, like working mothers, there's so many demands on our time, like being kind of efficient and a little more ruthless in how you use your time and not being afraid of turning things down or saying no.
Brittany, Kathryn, once again, thank you so much for those wonderful presentations, and thank you everybody for coming tonight.